Ibuprofen, naproxen, and meloxicam have the same cardiovascular warning. They all may increase the chance of heart attack or stroke, which can lead to death. This chance increases if you have heart disease or risk factors such as high blood pressure or when NSAIDs are taken for long periods. NSAIDs, including Celebrex, increase the chance of serious skin or allergic reactions or stomach and intestine problems such as bleeding and ulcers, which can occur without warning and may cause death. Patients also taking aspirin and the elderly are at increased risk for stomach bleeding and ulcers. Do not take Celebrex if you've had an asthma attack, hives, or other allergies to aspirin, NSAIDs, or sulfonamides. Get help right away if you have swelling of the face or throat or trouble breathing. Tell your doctor your medical history and find an arthritis treatment for you. Visit Celebrex.com and ask your doctor about Celebrex for a body in motion.
The new BlackBerry Playbook. It runs all this at the same time. Why can't every tablet do that? Powerful, portable Playbook.
So this is Enzo, the artiste behind my wardrobe. You know, when I got him on E-Trade, he was all like, "Oh no, I cannot do investing." That's actually a perfect Enzo. But after a couple educational videos and a little hand-holding from customer support, next thing you know, he's got a stunning portfolio. Now he's planning to retire in Tuscany. We're both pretty emotional about it. Shh. Don't say a word. You're welcome.
E-Trade. Investing Unleashed.
To the 5 a.m. scholar, the 2 trains and a bus rider, the I'll sleep when it's done academic. For 80 years, we've been inspired by you, and we've been honored to walk with you, to help you get where you want to be. Because your moment is now. Let nothing stand in your way. Learn more at keller.edu.
Common Sense is brought to you by DeVry University, celebrating 80 years.
So big powwow at the White House tonight between top Chinese and American officials. Our top economic and political guys meeting with their top economic and political guys. And guess who else is attending? Their top military guys, presumably with our top military guys. It's weird, but it's not surprising. I just wonder why we give China this kind of treatment. I know we owe them a lot of money, but does that mean surrendering all our pride? Look at us, we're pathetic. We're a great country, so they own a lot of our debt. Does anyone realize that's because we buy a lot of their stuff? So they take all that money and invest it back in us. And now we feel beholden because they're investing essentially our money back in us. You don't need an economics degree to see this is nuts. I mean, before anyone talks our finances being tainted, anyone recall the paints, the foods, the kids' toys from China that actually were tainted? This would be like me storming into a fitness gym and screaming, "Speed it up, guys," or "Put more oomph into it." Are you kidding? Look, I'm not saying China isn't right to say we're a fiscal mess. We are. But you better be squeaky clean yourself to make the charge, and they are not. We owe them, but that doesn't mean they own us. We are the reason China is the success it is. I hope someone at that meeting tonight at the White House mentions that, but let's just say I'm not betting on that. It is amazing. We hold all the chits, and yet we're the ones being chicken chits. I think it's total bullshit. I said that, albeit with a very scratchy voice. I apologize for that. But I'm not apologizing for something that could have been a lot worse. So count your blessings. And on Fox Business tonight, the fallout from that China meeting and why we are looking like the saps we are.
Hello, America. Welcome to the Glenn Beck program. I'm Judge Andrew Napolitano in tonight for Glenn. The president's popularity has soared in the wake of the killing of Osama bin Laden. Yet behind all the celebrations, America's economy is still sputtering. Unemployment has ticked up back north of 9%. The national debt is pushing past $14.3 trillion. And the Federal Reserve shows no sign of ending its century-long war on the dollar. But that didn't stop the president from taking an Osama victory lap at Ground Zero and elsewhere last week. His goal must be to distract the American people from the economic reality we all face, which includes gasoline at $4 a gallon. And what's worse is that behind the backs of a jubilant public, the president plans to ask Congress to borrow another $2.7 trillion. How can more borrowing and spending fix an economy destroyed by too much borrowing and spending? Only when the government stays within its means, only when the Fed stops printing cash, and only when the government lives within the confines of the Constitution will our economy begin to prosper. This week, the Democrats will introduce their solution: get rid of tax breaks for big oil. How will that fix the deficit? Steve Moore, senior economic writer for the Wall Street Journal, and Charlie Gasparino, senior correspondent at the Fox Business Network, my good buddy and author of Bought and Paid For, join us now. Steve, guys, welcome here. Steve, to you first. Housing prices saw the worst decline last week, or reported last week, since 2008. What does that mean for people that want to buy or sell a house today?
No, it's lousy news. I mean, look, the principal asset of most Americans, Judge, is their home. So when your house falls in value, that means that your net worth falls in value, that you're worth less than you thought you were. But here is the outrage of these declining home prices, Judge. If you look at how much Uncle Sam has spent over the last 3 years, in the last months of the Bush administration and the first 2.5 years under the Obama administration, Judge, we have spent $400 billion at the federal level helping people pay their mortgages to try to stabilize the mortgage market. In addition to that, as you well know, the Federal Reserve Bank now owns somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 trillion of these bad loans. My point is that despite all of these innovations by Uncle Sam to stabilize the market, it gets worse and worse. Nothing has worked.
I guess we shouldn't be surprised if Fannie and Freddie, after saying they don't want a bailout, they don't need a bailout, changed their minds and said, we'll take that cash.
Of course they will. I mean, what Steve points is a central tenet of the failure of Obamonomics, that you think that government can actually prop up the economy, can prop up the markets. I mean, look at it this way. Housing prices have to come down. It would have been nice if they came down really fast in the beginning instead of trying to prop it up. If they came down really fast in the beginning, guess what? They'd be going up right now. And that's one of the central tenets, failures of Obamonomics.
Right. All right, Steve. So on top of no more drilling in the Gulf, even though there were 31 oil wells there, only one of which had a very serious problem, BP. The other 30 were operating fine. None of those has been reopened. Now the Democrats, the Obama administration, wants to get rid of the oil depletion allowance, basically a tax break that encourages oil companies to drill. This at a time when gasoline is $4 a gallon. What kind of sense does that make?
Well, none whatsoever. I mean, if you want lower gas prices and oil prices, you want American oil companies to go out and find the oil we've got and drill for it. And everything Washington has done has basically made that essentially illegal, Judge. Now, look, I'll bet the three of us would certainly agree on something, that we don't like the terminology or any concept of taxpayer subsidy for anything. I don't want the taxpayer subsidy. And so if oil companies are getting subsidies, let's get rid of them. But you know what I don't hear the president saying, Judge, is why don't we get rid of the massive subsidies that we give to the wind and solar energies, which are in the tens of billions of dollars.
Or as you know, General Electric to create green jobs and all the stuff they do. I mean, this is another problem with Obamonomics. It tries to pick winners and losers. Bad guys and good guys. The bad guys are the oil companies, so let's screw them. Get rid of the tax breaks, but give all the tax breaks to everybody else. And by the way, it never works.
History shows that a planned economy is inferior to an economy based on free choice.
You don't have to convince me.
The government can't pick winners and losers. Just can't do it successfully.
If you want to know why, I believe still, even with this Osama bin Laden bounce that he's getting, the president still is in trouble from being reelected. I think it's going to be very close. Is because the economy is not responding to what he's done. It's not responding at least enough. Think about it this way. We had 10% unemployment. What did he do? He went out there tilting at windmills to try to push healthcare reform. It was really radically insane.
Steve, do you think that the president can leverage the bounce that he got in the polls from the killing of Osama bin Laden last week and the victory lap that he took into getting the Republicans to agree to raise the debt ceiling or any type of economic financial regulations that he wants that he otherwise wouldn't get?
Well, I don't blame President Obama for taking a victory lap. He should take 2 or 3 victory laps. I mean, this was an amazing accomplishment, getting bin Laden. But, you know, I'm not so sure this is going to work for the president in the long term. Certainly, it's an incredible national security triumph. But, you know, if you look at past elections, presidents that don't get reelected, Judge, are presidents that don't keep their eye on those 2 statistics that you just mentioned. One is the unemployment rate, which is still near 9 to 10%. And the other one, by the way, is inflation that we're feeling at the gas pump and that we're feeling at the grocery store. And if those 2 things remain as high as they are right now, remember the misery index under the Carter years. We got one of the highest misery index we've ever seen.
Charlie, explain to me why unemployment is probably worse in reality than the 9% that they're showing.
Well, it's worse because people have stopped looking for jobs, so they don't show in this 9%. But what's interesting about the 9%, a lot of people think that's a good thing because it went up. That means more people are looking for jobs. They're more positive about the economy. If they think they can find a job, they're looking for. So it does tick up. But think about it again. They are looking for jobs. And here's the problem, Steve. You have to believe that unemployment's going to go down to 6% for the president to declare economic victory, or 7%. And I'll tell you, that is almost impossible if you think about how many jobs need to be created.
Steve, but the Democrats and the folks around the president are already using this crazy word, recovery. What kind of a recovery is this?
Well, it's pretty anemic if this is a recovery when you've got 6% inflation and you've got 9 or 10% unemployment. But, you know, I think where the rubber really hits the road, I never answered your question about this debt ceiling. I think this is the battle that's coming this summer. And Judge, the Republicans cannot blink on this one. If they do, then Barack Obama will be reelected. We're going to have $2 or $3 trillion more debt.
And they need to ignore Wall Street. What did I tell you a couple weeks ago on this show?
You've told me so much.
The Wall Street firms, the minute the Republicans threatened not to raise the debt ceiling,
they would
come
be in
out
favor of it.
And listen, they need to ignore these guys. By the way, these guys have been colossally wrong so much over the last 20 years.
Does Gasparino?
And by the way, let me add something to that.
Go ahead, Steve.
Your friends are the people. I'm just kidding. Your friends on Wall Street. But you know, here's why they like to increase the debt ceiling, because they're the ones who sell the bonds.
That's right. They get an underwriting fee.
Of course. Do you agree that the Republicans should not let the president and Tim Geithner borrow more money, or do you take the Stuart Varney view that this would cause, the Tim Geithner view that this would cause a catastrophe overnight?
It will, because if we're in such a fix right now,
you gotta help me out, Steve.
We have to borrow to repay old borrowing. But to do that, they have to extract their pound of flesh, which is something. Give me something. And by the way, the markets will react so positively if we do something significant on debt.
All right, before we go, Steve, oil went down last week. Gasoline went up. Can you explain that?
Oh, there's a long lag time between the time you pump the oil from the ground and it ends up in the gas tank. But you know what? The oil price went back up again. And as long as we have this easy money policy, Ben Bernanke is as responsible as Barack Obama is for this bad economy.
Absolutely. Charlie Gasparino, Steve Moore, it's a pleasure. Thanks very much for joining us, guys.
Great to be with you.
Always terrific. Today in Washington, Timothy Geithner, the Secretary of the Treasury, is giving advice to the Chinese on what they should do with their currency. What a laugh. Shouldn't the Chinese be giving us advice on the value of hard work and savings? With me now is the perfect person to talk about this, global investor and a legend in the commodities game, Jim Rogers, chair of Rogers Holding. He has spent a lot of time in the Far East and is raising his children to be fluent in Mandarin Chinese. Jim, it's a pleasure. Welcome here.
I am delighted to be here, Judge.
What do the Chinese know and what do they do that we don't seem to know and that we don't do?
Well, they work hard. They save their money. They save and invest over 35% of their income. We save 2% of our invest 2% of our income. No, I mean, they're trying to all get ahead.
If you put money in a Chinese bank in China, do you get an approachable, a material return on it? Or do you get the type of interest rate that you get here, which is like 1% or less?
Higher rates of interest in China. They're much higher than you get here. Plus, of course, the appreciation of the currency. The currency is going up. Our currency is being debased. They're trying to destroy the value of our currency.
All right.
They being Washington.
Of course, of course. I want to put to you the question that I just put to Charlie Gasparino and Steve Moore. The president says we're experiencing a recovery. What the heck kind of a recovery is this?
Judge, if you're getting the money that they're throwing out the window from Washington,
of course
you're better off.
I'm one of the companies that they're stimulating.
Yes, you're better off, of course, but the rest of us are worse off. The debt is going straight through the roof. The nation is getting into trouble. Then next time we have a slowdown, what are we going to do? We shot our bullets.
What will happen if the Republicans stick to their guns and do not allow the president, do not vote to raise the debt ceiling. Bear in mind that earlier today, Speaker Boehner, the leader of the Republicans in the House, said we have to let the president borrow more. Bear in mind that there's a strong contingent of Republicans in the House that believe now is the time to draw the line in the sand. What happens if they do draw that line?
If they draw the line, the economy is going to slow down, but the government will stop spending. We're going to take some pain, but let's get the pain over with now, because if we wait a year or 2 years or 5 years, the pain's going to be unbearable. We're not going to be able to take the pain.
Here's my argument. My argument is, tell me what you think of this. If we just keep raising the debt ceiling and borrowing and borrowing and borrowing with no moral or financial intention or wherewithal to pay it back, at some point there will be a crisis because we will be paying too high taxes, too much in debt service, and something very bad will happen. And basically, when they want to raise the debt ceiling next week, they're just delaying the inevitable.
Well, you're exactly right. That's what I said. It's going to be unbearable pain if we have to wait 5 years before the market suddenly says to us, no more, we're not going to lend you any more money, interest rates will go through the roof, the value of the dollar will collapse. You talk about pain, you talk about suffering. Wait till that happens in 5 years or 3 years.
You and I were raised believing that China was a communist country and that the rulers were dictators, and in large measure they are. However, is free market economics taught in Chinese schools?
Judge, let me tell you, the Chinese call themselves communists, but they're not communists. They're the best capitalists, among the best capitalists in the world, right? California is more communist than China right now.
Whoa!
Massachusetts is more communist than China.
Right, give me an example of the flourishing of the free market in China, and mention the government, because my fear is not that people won't have the energy, it's that the government will stifle them.
Well, wait a minute. First of all, the government changes every 5 years in China. It's not a dictator. You call it a dictatorship. What kind of dictatorship is it where the government changes every 5 years and you guys come in to run it? Mao Zedong is dead. Mao Zedong is not coming back anymore. Joseph Stalin is not coming back anymore. Those days are finished. Nobody wants to be a communist anymore.
Is it easier to start up a company in the literal startup sense, where you get seed money and you make a small investment and some people loan money to you and you sell them your ideas in China than in the United States today?
Well, the venture capital business is booming in China. Yes, Western venture capitalists and Asian venture capitalists are flocking there, keep investing with people, young people, old people, to start businesses. Whether it's easy or not, I don't know, because I haven't done it in the U.S. or in China recently. But I know that lots and lots of people are doing it. And there are huge numbers of people making vast fortunes in China who started off as rag dealers.
When the president and the Treasury Secretary and those who agree with them complain about trade deficits, do they know what they're talking about? Example, if I can buy a widget or a million widgets from a manufacturer in China, the quality is as good or better than here and the cost is a lot less. What's wrong with that?
I agree. Wouldn't you want to buy something that's cheaper and just as good?
Of course.
And by the way, China has trade deficits with other countries. You know, the Germans, for instance, have a trade surplus with China. So some people are able to go into China and sell things and make money and still do better than we do.
And why does the American government have a problem with that?
Please, Judge, you're bad for my nervous system. They don't know what they're doing. They don't have a clue what's going on. They're all sitting around trying to buy each other's votes, pay off their friends, and win another election. They're not trying to do what's good for the country.
All right, what do you think that the Treasury Secretary is negotiating, even as we speak, Tim Geithner, with his counterparts from China, who's visiting him in Washington this week? What does he want from the Chinese financial community?
Well, what he says he wants is for the value of the U.S. dollar to go down and the value of the Chinese currency
He's doing
to go
a pretty good job of reducing the value of the American dollar by himself here.
You're right. He doesn't have to do it exactly right. He could do it all by himself. No, but he's trying to get the Chinese to agree to let the value of the dollar go down, the Chinese currency goes up. He thinks that will solve our trade deficit. Judge, throughout history, people have tried to debase the currency to try to get the economy going.
Right.
It has never worked in the long run. It has never worked in the medium term.
But the mindset of Tim Geithner and Barack Obama and Ben Bernanke, the chair of the Federal Reserve, is that they don't debase the currency. You and I believe they do. Basic economics teaches that they do. What will it take to get through their skulls that when they print cash, they don't make people richer, except the people to whom they initially give that cash?
When they resign. When they get thrown out of office, then they'll understand. Then they'll understand what's going on. It has never worked, what they're doing. But, you know, Mr. Geithner has never been right. Please look at his records in the 17 years he's been in Washington. And Mr. Bernanke, oh my goodness, he has never been right about it. You should get somebody to research it at Fox. Just go down and see what he said every month.
Right.
If I were wrong every month for 8 years, you wouldn't have me back on the show. He's been wrong every month for 8 years.
Absolutely, absolutely. Last question before I let you go. Do the negotiators in Washington, Joe Biden, John Boehner, Republicans, Democrats in the Congress and the executive branch, have an eye on China? In other words, are they, about the national debt, are they concerned that China might think that we might not be able to pay them back?
Of course, Judge. The Chinese have said, wait a minute, guys, you keep running up huge debts. What are you going to do? Would you keep lending money every month to somebody who just keeps building more and more and more debt? If you had a brother-in-law like that, wouldn't you say, listen, brother-in-law, I'm not going to lend you any more money. You've got to go and take care of yourself. Well, that's what the Chinese are starting. But a lot of people are.
You know what's so good about you, Rogers? You make these things sound so easy and understandable and compelling. I hope the government is watching. Jim Rogers, it's a pleasure. Have a great trip back to the Far East. See more with the self-made millionaire investor, Jim Rogers. That's tonight on my show, Freedom Watch, at 8 p.m. Eastern on the Fox Business Network. Not O'Reilly, Freedom Watch. And just call him the $1 Million Man, right? Ron Paul. After last week's Republican presidential debate, the congressman saw a cool $1 million come into his campaign checkbook in one day. We'll hear why he may or may not be the best Republican presidential nominee.